Hiya Mark. Phase 2 of the session was to sort of tidy up the overall launch angles and start direction with the driver. And one of the things that we discussed in your session was that, first of all, from down the line, as we were coming into impact with a very straight right arm condition. So the right arm was firing very, very quickly. When the right arm fires as quick as that, sooner or later the club's going to start to pass the hands and the club face is going to start to close down. So we tried to create a feel for creating this softer right arm. We showed you the spectrum that Andy had put on one of the forums, illustrating the position of the right forearm in relation to the shape of shot that you would want to hit. And the thing that you noticed with the guys who drew the ball the most was they had much more sort of softer right arms. Tom Lehman's right forearm was actually on a completely different plane to the shaft. It was sitting on a slightly flatter plane than the angle of the shaft impact. That was creating shoulders that were much squarer, hips that were clearing but also sliding continuously rather than just turning and extending, which was one of the problems. If you want to keep the head on the wall, you must make sure that the hip slide continues through impact, which means when the hips are open, the hip slide is in this direction, consequently keeping you on the wall. And you can see the difference in this image on the bottom left and the top left in regards to what the upper spine is doing. See, on the top left, the hips are very, very sort of tucked underneath. The thoracic and the neck are flexing forward, trying to prevent the club getting thrown away from you too much. The right arm straightening and the club is closing down very quickly. The other thing that was producing for you was a lot of heel strikes. So on the bottom left, the feeling for you was from P4 to P5 to internally rotate the right elbow, work the right elbow in, which in turn shallowed out the shaft. I'll show you some footage of that shortly. And then try to maintain the angle in accumulator 1 all the way through impact. That was the feel. And that creates a completely different look coming into the golf ball in regards to what the right forearm's doing, right elbow if you will, the shoulders, the upper spine, the hips, etc. So that was the feel. I'll just run you through doing your drill. So from the top, you had to feel that. The elbow was rotating inwards or rotating under, whichever you feel is more appropriate for you to consider. That's shallowing out the shaft completely. And then from there, try and maintain the angle in accumulator 1 for as long as possible. And when we did that, we looked a lot more like the footage of Grant Waite that we showed you on the B1 system during your visit. So that was the feel. Also, we talked about, when you looked at it from face on, what we wanted to try and create was this idea of internally rotating the elbow again, rotating the elbow under. You can see the amount of hip slide that creates, an axis tilt. So that's putting the axis tilt in there that you're looking for. And then from P5, maybe P6, allow the club head to overtake the hands. Remember what we talked about, but that doesn't mean that the club face is necessarily going to shut down. You were rolling, if you will, the wrists over, so you were releasing accumulator 3 a lot, which was why the rate of closure was very high. What we want to do here is allow the club to catch up with the hands so the shaft is sitting a little bit more vertically with driver. So we're going to increase the overtaking rate coming into the golf ball, which is going to produce a shallower angle of attack and add loft to the golf club, because one of the things we were really struggling with on the day was creating any sort of decent launch. Certainly towards the end of your session, when you started to get that launch angle up and you started to produce more of the look that you're seeing on the top right, the club head speed went way up. The launch was fantastic, much, much better. And certainly based on that last shot, it was the first time during the session that you hit a nice high push draw down the range. So the signs in there that was improving. So the feeling from P6 is to increase the overtaking rate. up to impact. And what we see here on the bottom right was one of your drivers sort of later in the session when you were trying to do this. Certainly a much better move through the ball with the left leg, nowhere near as much flexing of the left knee at the start of the downswing. Hips moving forward more, still turning, still clearing, not got a problem with that. See a hell of a lot of shaft lean there when we're hitting driver. So we want to try and sort of create that rather than what we see is a real high overtaking through impact, post impact almost, when that right arm straightens and that left arm starts to straighten as well. We want to see a more gradual overtaking like we're seeing here on the top right. So for you, with driver, when you're doing the drill and you're trying to maintain the flying wedge like we saw in the first phase of your lesson, left leg straightening, belt buckle facing the target, feeling like the overtaking rate is a little bit higher and almost like you're dorsiflexing that left wrist a little bit on the way through just to get some loft on the golf club. When we look at it from down the line, towards the end of the session, in relation to the changes that we're looking for, shaft still gets a little bit above plane for me. I'd like to see it a little bit more in behind your hands at P6. But what we're starting to see now is the hips clearing a little bit more, the upper body not flexing forward quite as much. And we're starting to see a little bit of a softening of that right forearm, which again is a sign that the player is sliding the hips a little bit more, which means that the right shoulder's a little bit lower, which means that the right arm doesn't have to be as straight in order to reach the ball, if you will, and expand the radius of the swing. So the bottom left footage is what we want more of, and the top right footage is what we want more of. And you can see that towards the end of your session, you're certainly moving in the right direction. If you keep putting more of what you see on the bottom left and more of what you see on the top right into your swing, you're going to be ripping driver, I'll tell you now, because there's a lot of really good things in your golf swing. And to have a swing as good as that and not be using driver is just criminal. I think your confidence is going to increase unbelievably so over the coming months. Just keep working on what we've said. And like I say, if you want to get some footage across in the next couple of weeks to make sure that you're working along the right lines, feel free to do so. But those feels that we gave you, keep maxing them out. A really important image for you, the images that I sent across, is the one of you on either side and Ben Hogan at impact in the middle. That is massive. So if you had to work on one piece, that would be it. So try and sort of create that impact position, which is very much what we see here. I'm just going to bring this up bigger for you. I love this idea for you. I think this is probably, this demonstrates all the pieces that we talked about during the lesson. Good setup, nice position at the top, holding on to accumulate a one a little bit longer, hips sliding forward, creating a little bit of axis tilt, left knee moving forward, and then from P6 onwards, left knee starts to straighten, club catches up with the hands, no translation back. That's on the money right there. Keep making that action, mate, and you're going to be ripping it. Good luck with it. I look forward to working with you soon. Well done.